I don't believe everyone's called to add commentary. I feel like I sense that you might sense that you have a responsibility to be a public mouthpiece, for the church. When did you realize that you had that ability? You also had that calling.
Yeah.
And how do you shepherd that responsibility as well?
That's a great question. In terms of when did I recognize that? First of all, I think I kind of fell into it in my role as a pastor, and I saw in my people a wrestling with some larger issues and questions I see out on social media in conversation. And so, first of all, I wanted to pastor people well. It just so happens that because of social media, these things get amplified. But the impetus behind it all was, how do I help the people in Queens think through some of these issues with greater nuance, wisdom? When did it happen? I think it happened after Eric Gardner was killed. Or Michael Brown. I mean, around 2014, 2015, where we start seeing these uprisings around cities in our nation. And I got in touch with something in my soul related to injustice that I thought, I think I need to say some things. And 2013, 2014, 2015, I don't think I had the nuance that I try to carry today. And I know 10 years from now, by God's grace, I'll probably say, oh, I didn't have the nuance back then and the layers that I have today. And that's the hope. But I would give commentary trying to speak prophetically about wrongdoing, about what God might want. But what I was not doing as well was trying to remain emotionally connected, particularly to the people that God has entrusted to me, the pastor. And so I think I've learned, but it started there in those things happening with Michael Brown, Eric Gardner. That's where it started. And then from that point on, it just started emerging more and more. And I think the reason Thomas Merton, who's regarded as one of the most prolific authors of the 20th century, he was a century ahead of his time, a century. And he wrote a lot about the integration of justice and contemplation. And the reason why Merton's words, this guy's a monk who lives in Kentucky. And he's writing about justice, writing about police brutality, writing about so much that's happening in the world. And he had this lens to see. And that came out of a life of contemplation for Merton. And because I've been so impacted by Merton and by the monastic tradition, my hope is that whatever I'm saying is coming from two places. It's coming from a place of deep prayer with God, and it's coming from a place of honest self-confrontation with myself. And my hope is that I'm writing from a place of humility, writing from a place where I recognize there are things that I am complicit with. And so I want to write from a perspective of lament and confession and bring a tender approach to it. But at the same time, I want to be pointed with some of the things I want to say. And that is a dance. That's a delicate.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do it better than others. Sometimes I think I do a good job with it. Sometimes I don't do a good job with it. But it is that dance of tenderness as well as and pointedness that I've tried to hold together. But I do think that comes out of deep prayer, self-examination, but also I read a lot, man.
Yeah,
I mean, so
So
people are speaking into stuff often don't even have the data or the research down. So I do a lot of reading as well.
It's a lot of the people that are adding commentary are really looking to speak to an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And so I really do appreciate, because you could tell that. And I think that comes with the responsibility of knowing that God has also called you to this and shepherding this church. with Barack Obama, Donald Trump, now Joe Biden, there's, again, I think it's always existed in the church, this political ideology that has often become idolatry. How do you navigate it? For example, in your church in Queens, it's multi-ethnic, multicultural, so you have people on different sides of the aisle. How do you navigate when you're going to prepare a sermon, when you're going to prepare, disciple? Is it a one size fits all? Do you segment? Do you say, okay, point 1 is going to be for all my liberals, point 2 is going to be for my conservatives, and point 3 is going to be for my people who are indifferent, Or how do you approach navigating the wide spectrum of political ideology that exists within people?
I think I try to do it. And one example is before the 2020 election, I preached about 6 sermons on God, politics, and the church. And I think what I tried to do there, more than anything, is I wanted to preach not as a preacher, but as a pastor. And there's a difference. To preach as a preacher, really the emphasis is on communication, the emphasis is on delivery, the emphasis is on generating a response, announcing something. That I can preach as a preacher, and I'm broad brushing here. But to preach as a pastor is really to preach, number one, to people, to their hearts. I just don't want to get through a talk. I want to emotionally and spiritually connect with people. And so when I think about topics that are often very highly divisive, I think about people. And because I'm a pastor, because I've spent countless hours with people over coffee in their homes, I have a good sense in terms of how many in our congregation think. And so when I'm preparing something, I'm thinking, how would this person hear this? Or how do I think this person should hear this? And so I preach out of my pastoring, which is why it's a big danger for pastors to not be with people. That's a very big danger of pastoral ministry, which is why I think some pastors should not be called pastors.
Yeah.
We should change their title to preacher. Because pastors are in the lives of people.
Right.
We're not just delivering stuff. But I think about individuals and how might they hear this? I don't think I did that early on because I wanted to preach. I think I want to preach now as a pastor, not just simply as a preacher, especially for the people that God has entrusted to me in Queens.
Right.
That's my family. I want to preach to them
Yeah.
as their pastor, not simply as just a preacher.